So I guess it's going to be cloudy this weekend because I've just opened the door to the courier and received delivery of the Seestar S50 smart scope from ZWO. And if you're watching this video, I'm sure you're interested to know how it performs. So let's open it up and check it out. Hey guys, welcome back to the Stargazer Man channel. So I actually took delivery of that unit about 4 months ago now, and I didn't have bad weather just for the weekend. There was bad weather for probably 2 or 3 months. But we've since had really great weather, so I managed to get a chance to really test out the unit. Big thank you to ZWO for sending me the unit to review. It's going to be a completely impartial review, and I'm going to tell you what I like about the unit and what I don't like about the unit. So it's going to be a completely honest review, and I'll also give an opinion of who I think this telescope is suited for. So a lot of the reviews of the Seestar S50 were given by very seasoned astrophotographers and astronomers, and what I felt was that they didn't really approach the reviews from the perspective of the absolute beginner. So for this review, I wanted to start by taking the approach of having zero understanding of astrophotography and even a very, very basic understanding of astronomy. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I've seen a lot of posts on social media and some of the astronomy web forums where people had purchased the Seestar and either were disappointed because they were expecting a different result or just didn't understand how to use the unit. And I felt that a lot of that would have been solved just by having some very, very basic beginner tips or understanding of really how to use the unit, what to expect from it, and then also the next steps after that. I've also seen some reviews where the unit has been compared to very professional astrophotography rigs, which I felt was a little bit out of balance. So the way I've approached doing this review is to use the unit as if I was a complete amateur, and just to see what kind of results you can get out of the box. So initially, without doing any post-processing, really just following the instructions that's in the unit and on the website, and seeing what results that I would get on my mobile phone. And so to do that, I spent the last couple of months trying to image as many things in the catalog as possible. So went through galaxies, globular clusters, emission nebula, reflection nebula. I also did some lunar photography and some solar imaging also. I even managed to capture some ISS passes of the moon and of the sun. So stick around until the end of the video and I'll show you how I did those. So if you're a seasoned astronomer or astrophotographer, you may be asking yourself, should I spend lens money or a nice eyepiece money on a unit like this? I'll give you my opinion at the end, and I think you might be slightly surprised. If you do decide after watching this video to purchase the unit, then please support the channel by clicking the link in the description below. Also, please subscribe and like, and please do ask questions in the comments. I will try to be as responsive as possible and answer any questions that you guys have. So what's in the box? Well, obviously you'll have the Seestar unit itself, and I'll give more details about each of these items as we go through the video, so we don't spend too much time in an unboxing video at the start. There's the tripod, which is a nice sturdy carbon tripod. You also get the Seestar solar filter. And last but not least is the actual box itself. ZWO have done a really great job here of providing you with a very neat and sturdy transport and storage solution for the telescope and its accessories. And everything can be packed and unpacked really quickly and safely. Within a matter of seconds. So I'm going to show you how to set up the Seestar, and this will be part of the review as well, but specifically this is if you've never set up any kind of astronomical equipment before. I want to give you some tips on this as we do it. Don't set it up on a table like this. This is purely just so that I could record at a good angle. Notice how I'm holding the Seestar under my arm and I'm screwing the legs into the unit. Don't do it the other way around. You're going to find it a bit tricky and you could potentially drop the unit on the ground. You don't need to tighten it too hard. Just make sure it's nice and tight. Something to think about before you turn the unit on is, are there any obstacles that are going to block your view? So make sure that you set it up with a clear view of as much of the sky as possible so that you don't end up having to move it later on while you're imaging. So when you're happy with the position of the unit, switch it on and you're going to get a message when it's ready to go.
Powering on, ready to connect.
So the very next thing that I would recommend that you would do is, once you have connected to the Seestar, is to calibrate the compass. This is really important to do because yes, the compass will be somewhat calibrated when you turn it on, but what you want to do is you want to manually do this every time you start your session, just to get as accurate a reading as possible. So when you have successfully calibrated the compass, the very next thing to do, if you haven't already been prompted by the unit to do so, is to level the scope. So in advanced features and adjust level, you'll see a little infographic that shows you how level the telescope is, and you adjust the tripod until the two circles coincide. Now, while I found it pretty easy to do, it's still a little bit tricky, and there is an accessory that you can get from Newer called a level adjuster, and this sits quite nicely between the tripod and the Seestar unit. It's got 3 sturdy spring-loaded adjusters with locking bolts, which really help speed up the whole process. And the link to where you can pick up one of those is in the description. So just to go back to the tripod for a moment, the tripod that's supplied with the unit itself is really sturdy. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about it. In fact, I think it's actually super light, very compact, and under very windy conditions, it held up really, really well. But there are times when I did need to give the unit an extra bit of height, and so I just used whatever I had. As you can see here, I'm just using an old AZA GTI mount. But any kind of mount that you have yourself from a previous telescope, or even a decent camera mount, then you should be able to transfer the Seestar unit onto that. Please make sure that the tripod that you are going to use is sturdy. If you put the unit onto a tripod and it flexes or wobbles, you are going to get dropped frames and it's not going to be a very good evening for you. So I think a lot of people might receive the Seestar during the day, and if the sun is out, you'd be tempted to try out some solar imaging straight away. If you are, that's fine. Just make sure that before you do any solar imaging that you always have the supplied solar filter installed and you're ready to shoot. Now you may be wondering, when you're setting up the unit, how do I actually install the solar filter when it's in its home position? So let's walk through the process of how we do that. In the app, you would select solar, and then you're going to get a warning to say make sure that the solar filter is installed. And as you can see in the image, next to the telescope is an arrow up and an arrow down. And by clicking and holding on the arrow up, you're going to angle the scope up just enough so that you have enough room to place the solar filter over the aperture of the scope. Now I found that the solar filter that's supplied with the unit is really good quality, and for most people's purposes, especially newcomers to the hobby, this is going to be more than adequate. I do have a separate video for making a DIY batter solar filter, so if you're interested in that, then check it out after this video. So once you have the solar filter installed and you've clicked on installed and shooting, the unit will now start to scan the sky and locate the sun. And it's going to figure this out based on the time and the date, the GPS locations, its level and its compass heading. And it appears to hone in on the sun based on the level of brightness that it is detecting on the screen. And it keeps refining and heading towards that brightness until eventually it decides that it has the sun centered. And once it has, it will then ask you to confirm. And once you do, it will then track the sun in that position. You can also then hit the enable target correction feature, which is the top right icon, which will then ensure that the sun doesn't drift too far left, right, up or down out of the field of view. So what I normally will do when I'm imaging the sun or the moon, and for lunar photography, it's pretty much the exact same process, but without the filter. I normally will start by focusing on the object to make sure it's as well focused as possible. And for solar imaging, generally I'll select the area to focus on, the limb, because oftentimes there aren't actually sunspots on the sun. We're very fortunate at the time of making this video that the sun is quite active, and there's seems to be always sunspots on the sun, so that allows the autofocus to really do a great job. And then you can also play around with the settings like the exposure levels and the brightness and the contrast, but in general I leave these on automatic. Now sometimes the unit may actually fail to locate the sun, and if it does, then there's really a very simple hack to allow you to align the telescope to the sun exactly. So on the solar filter itself, you'll notice that there's a tiny little hole on the tab where you hold it. And if you set it up so that it's approximately 90 degrees perpendicular to the telescope, you can use the light that's coming through the hole as a pointer to allow you to manually move left, right, up, down until you have the telescope pointing directly in line with the sun. I feel that the Seestar, it's aimed towards the kind of the entry level amateur, beginner amateur, and a lot of the, I suppose, the more technical aspects of astrophotography, they're really hidden behind a lot of the programming. They're not overtly explained in any of the websites or really any of the kind of advertising, etc., for the unit, which I think is actually quite good, because astrophotography in itself is quite, it is quite complex and there is a learning curve. But I do firmly believe that smart scopes like this Seestar and others, I think they're really, an entry point into this whole world of astrophotography and even astronomy. And while I'm on my soapbox, I might as well admit that there are quite a lot of gatekeepers out there in the community when it comes to things like astrophotography. My steadfast advice to you as a long-running astrophotographer, astronomer, is to categorically ignore anybody who might look potentially down on, or make comments on people using devices like this, and basically saying it's not real astrophotography or you're not a real astrophotographer. Just because a person had a different route into the hobby, and because potentially they had a lot more of a difficult and expensive, journey to get to the point where they can produce the images that they do. I think some people just feel a little bit aggrieved by that. I don't think it's warranted. I think that, technology will always keep improving. And that's one of the beauties about this hobby, is that, within a couple of months, there's always some new product out there. There's always some new device out there to kind of, I suppose, explore and really get excited about and get people into the hobby. So as far as I'm concerned, anything that really gets anybody excited about, the hobby, or the whole area of astronomy, and get them out under the stars and taking photographs and sharing these images online and sharing them with their friends. It's a great thing. It's not a good thing. It's a great thing, and we really should be kind of supporting anybody that wants to get into into this crazy hobby. So yeah, my kind of final thoughts on, in terms of when we say that there's certain types of people that were willing to help, and then there's also the detractors, I would just literally say ignore the noise and just go with where the people are willing to help you. There's some fantastic forums on Facebook, etc. for especially the ZWO users group is amazing. And don't feel embarrassed or afraid to post your images up there and ask people for advice and ask people, hey, what do you think of this? And for the most part, people are just really super eager to come back and say, you know, hey, I think maybe it's a little bit overexposed, or I think that you could maybe tweak this setting and get a different result. Same goes for the post-processing side of things. I didn't want to get into it in this video, and I might do a separate video on the whole kind of post-processing part when it comes to you know, getting the best out of your images possible. But as I said at the start of the video again, this is really just to review this unit as, you know, I suppose somebody who's come along who's never really taken any astrophotography images before, and to see if they follow the exact instructions in the unit itself, what can they get. And towards the end, at the end of the video, I have a kind of a greatest hits reel of not just the lunar shots and the solar shots, but really as many of the kind of I suppose beginner targets as possible that I could take while I was reviewing the scope. And these are unprocessed images. These are basically exactly as they came from the unit. So they'd be the exact same as what you would share on Facebook or whatever, without doing any adjustments to them whatsoever. Stick around until the end of the video and watch that kind of greatest hits reel. I'll put as much details up about each object as possible, and I'll also have a link in the description to my Flickr page where you'll be able to go in and see each of those images in a bit more detail, just to see exactly what you can get from them. So something really fun to try, and you can do this on the moon and the sun, obviously with the solar filter, is a ISS transit. So the International Space Station will sometimes cross the disk of the sun and the moon, and depending on where you are on the planet, you might just be lucky enough to actually have this happen close to where you live. Or there could be a transit that's close by within a couple of kilometers. And to find out where these are going to occur, you simply go to transitfinder.com. And this web page is going to ask you to put in some settings, so your location, and you can add this manually, or you can use select from a map. And then you also want to put in the time span for when it's going to search for transits. Generally about 2 weeks is plenty here, but you can go further if you like. And then obviously the last part is setting your preferred travel distance. You can set this to whatever you like depending on how far you're willing to travel, and hit calculate. And then the results will show you a series of passes or nearby passes. And you can then scroll down through these and see, is there any where there's a direct pass, or where there's one where it's a kind of a near miss. So as you scroll down along through here, you can see there's no notification of any of them being a direct pass. I chose this location randomly just for an example. But what we'll do is we'll scroll back up to the top and we'll find one where there is a close pass. And you can also see that there's extra information on some of these, like the angular size of the ISS and its distance. The altitude really is what you're looking for here. The higher the altitude, generally the greater the angular size of the ISS, or the bigger it's going to be. So as you can see here, it's showing you exactly where the center line is going to be. So for example, if I zoom in and I click on the center of this road here, it's going to show me in the infographic what that's actually going to look like in terms of the pass itself. So if we go back into the list, it's actually going to show you now what that would have looked like if there was a direct pass. So if you're in that exact spot at that exact time recording, you should capture an ISS transit. So I'm going to walk you through how you would actually do some deep sky imaging with the Seestar. So as you can see here, I have the unit set up outside on my rickety table. Again, purely just for the purposes of recording the video. I would always advise to put the unit on something solid, like the ground, or you know, a much better option than just a picnic table. So just some of the technical things that I want to mention from testing the unit and downloading the firmware updates, etc. I've always found that the firmware updates succeeded. There was never really any issue. I felt that there was a couple of times where some of the bugs could have potentially have been addressed a bit sooner, but I really can't fault ZWO in terms of their responsiveness, and they do listen to the community, and they're always aiming to make improvements, which is fantastic. So I'd say yes, there's longevity within this unit. I'm sure that there's going to be other versions that will come out, but for right now, even though it's only been out for a short while, I do think that this unit is going to really, last the course. And even if there is newer versions come out, I think that it's always going to be great in its own right as a little powerhouse for doing, solar observing, lunar observing, and basically, nice deep sky observing with a good field of view. So as you can see, I'm connecting again, and the process really is super simple when it comes to selecting the object that you want to image. So what you need to do is hit on stargazing, and then in the bottom right hand corner you'll see a little symbol for the Big Dipper. That's the atlas. Go to the atlas and then go to the top right and hit search, and then that will bring you to the kind of object menu or tonight's best. There's an update imminently coming that is going to allow you to get into this view directly from the homepage. But once you're in the view, you then have a selection of objects to choose from. Now, in my test, I wanted to shoot the Orion Nebula as it was nicely positioned. So you can scroll through the menu on various different ways to actually find this, but the easiest way to find it is by going down through the catalog to Messier. And then once you're in the Messier catalog, then you can scroll down until you find M42, the Orion Nebula. You can also just use the search function. So then once you've located the object that you want to image, you hit on gazing. And this is effectively telling the unit to go to the Orion Nebula. So it switches back to the atlas, and the red frame here is really just showing where we want the Seestar to focus onto. So as you can see, it wakes up, does all those calculations we spoke of before, figures out exactly where it is, when it is, the level, etc. And the blue box is where the Seestar believes that it's pointing. And it compares the two and adjusts until it has the object in the center. That's called plate solving. So once you're happy, the object is where you need it to be and your focus is good, you can hit the big red button in the middle, which is where the magic happens. So it's now going to stack all of the images it captures one on top of the other. And effectively, it's going to remove anything that's not light that's coming from the sky. The sensor will produce little pixels. Sometimes you might see this on nighttime photographs in your camera where there's a lot of red and green pixels. So this process is removing all of those, and it's only stacking together real light from the object. And as you can see here, right before your eyes, you're starting to see all of the detail in the wispy nebula surrounding the stars that are very visible to the eye. Okay, so here is the final reel of some of the shots that I got that are unprocessed straight from the Seestar itself. As I go through these, I'm going to discuss certain things that come up. So for example, on this particular one, you see a line. That's obviously because I bumped the scope. This one here, you can see that there's a bit of fuzziness to it, and that's because of light pollution. Here's an example of a street light that's causing light pollution on the left hand side. So an easy solution to this is a 3D printed dew shield that also acts as a really good blocker for stray light pollution. There's a link to these in the description. They're actually 3D printed by my son as a school project, so please go ahead and support his school project in producing these. He'd be very, very happy with a handful of orders if possible. You can see here that I'm fitting a star spiker, and the idea of this is that you're interrupting the light that's hitting the sensor, and you're causing these diffraction spikes on the objects, and you can twist these into whatever orientation that you like. And the set is interchangeable, so you can just mount the star spikers directly on in front of the lens if you so wish. Here's an example with Betelgeuse, and this is an example of M42. You can see the brighter stars in the background are spiking. I also made a white light solar filter for the Seestar with 3D printed parts using a Batter solar filter paper, and the link to the video is in the description. Now, I'm not saying that the filter that comes with the Seestar isn't fit for purpose. It's absolutely perfectly fine, but I just wanted to try create a white light filter just to see what the differences were, and maybe could pick up a little bit of extra detail in the granulation on the surface of the sun. So back to my photo reel of some of the objects that I have taken with the Seestar while I was testing. Apologies, some of these don't have the descriptions for them in it. Anybody that wants to ask any questions about any of these images, please just ask away in the comments, and I'm more than happy to answer. Most of these shots are really short integration time, so the total stacked time for each of these images is really short. So it's just an example of what you can actually get with this unit from relatively dark skies in a short period of time. And I have to say that this has really reignited my passion and interest in astrophotography, simply because of just how easy it is to actually get these images. And of course, these aren't going to win any astrophotography competitions, but that's absolutely not the point. Obviously, you can spend hours and hours in external programs to tease the most detail out of these shots. And some of you will just be perfectly happy with what you're getting from the unit as is. But to give you an example, I processed these images of M51 and Cyril, and this is the result. Now, you may start to see some kind of odd artifacts creeping in your final images, like these dark corners, etc. Don't worry about those. That's basically field rotation. So as the unit is tracking the object across the sky, it's keeping the object that you want to photograph centered, and then it's sort of twisting as it's following the arc of the object as it moves across the sky. On some images, it's quite pronounced because the movement is quite pronounced. And then on other objects, depending on where they are in the sky, it mightn't be. But over time, the longer that you shoot an object, the more pronounced those will be. But you can always crop them out. And the Seestar does a great job of keeping these images or keeping the object in your image generally in the center of the frame. So speaking about object choice, generally the Seestar is really for galaxies, nebula, and clusters, etc., as we've just been showing here. You will be able to take photographs or images of comets. For example, here's a couple that I've taken, and you can do some really interesting things where you can actually do some time lapse of comets as they move across the sky, which is pretty cool. The Seestar is not a planetary telescope. This is an example of what you'll get if you try to image Jupiter. It's a really small field of view, and it's not designed for planetary imaging. For planetary imaging, you're going to need a much larger focal ratio, and to capture all of that great detail in the clouds, etc. Jupiter is quite a large planet, so you will be able to see something if you want to give that a try. For example, this is Venus, and it's just a wobbly blob. So while it's interesting to give this a shot and see what you can get, please don't think that there's anything wrong with the telescope, as you know, it's just not suited for planetary imaging at all. It is really built out of the box for nebulas, galaxies, etc. And lunar and solar photography is actually second to none with this unit, as you can see here. Under the right conditions, you're going to get really super crisp video and images, especially if you stack them, and great fun trying to capture ISS transits of the moon and the sun also. So guys, in 2 weeks time, I'm going to be taking the Seestar S50 to the top of Mount Teide on the Canary Island of Tenerife. So above the clouds and in pristine skies, I'm really going to push this unit to the test to see what exactly you can get from fantastic conditions. So please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications bell so you'll get a notification when that video drops. Ask any questions that you like in the comments below, and I will really do my best to answer your questions for you. Clear skies and keep looking up.